My name is Tracy Bills, Executive Director for CRRA. We're here to discuss beverage container redemption challenges during COVID-19. We've got quite a packed schedule, so I'm going to get started. We're keeping everyone muted for the first portion of the webinar. So if you have any questions, use the chat box on the side. Works really, really well. Despina should be able to mute some if you forget, so hopefully we can keep that manageable. We will be videotaping this, so it'll be available in the next couple of days. If you're only able to see part of it, or you know somebody who would really benefit from seeing it, it will be on our website. Also, if you are interested in SWANA CEUs, we can give one credit for that. Just let Despina or I know, or you can email info@CRRA.com. As far as resources, CRRA does have a COVID-19 website, and on that website we have all of the information on these webinars, and we also have our forum that we're using to communicate information back and forth, so definitely look at that. And also, the one important thing on my end anyways is I'd love to be able to hear what you want to listen to. This is our fourth webinar, and everyone's had a different topic and all I feel very interesting. We will keep doing these webinars if the interest is there and the topics are of interest. So if you have any ideas, send them our way. One of the things I'm thinking about is re-entry once shelter in place is lifted. So if you know of anyone or yourself that would like to talk about what you're doing, let me know. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get into the introductions with our speakers. We have 4 of them today. The first is Adam Tauber, who is with CalRecycle. He was appointed Deputy Director in charge of the CalRecycle Division of Recycling in August 2018, having previously served in that role in an interim capacity. Previously, he served in several positions within DOR, which administers the state's beverage container recycling program, including supervising lead attorney and supervising attorney. Mr. Tauber was acting chief counsel at the California Department of Conservation from 2018 to 2019, 2008 to 2009, where he was staff counsel from 2000 to 2004. He was an attorney and decision writer at the U.S. Social Security Administration in 1999, attorney advisor in the Disaster Assistance Office at the U.S. Small Business Administration from 94 to 99, an attorney at the Alameda County Bar Association from 93 to 94. Mr. Tauber holds a Bachelor of Arts in Liberal Studies from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and a Juris Doctorate from the Whittier College School of Law. Our second speaker, which will be Richard Valle. He is the founder and president of Tri-Ced Community Recycling, California's largest nonprofit recycling company that employs at-promise youth and provides union jobs for local residents. In addition to its recycling collection services in the city of Union City and the city of Hayward, Tri-Ced also operates a buyback redemption center at their facility in Union City. Richard has served as Alameda County Supervisor of District 2 since 2012 and served as a Union City Council member for 13 years, from 1997 to 2010. Richard has a Bachelor in Arts degree in Sociology and a Master's in Public Administration from California State University East Bay. Richard is also a Vietnam vet. So Richard, I just wanted to thank you for your service in the military and to your community. It's pretty amazing. Our third speaker will be Paul Faherty, who works for Strategic Materials and has been the lead for the Western region since 2005, which encompasses all operations in Arizona, California, Nevada, Texas, Washington, Mexico, and 5 Midwest plants. The Western Division's 17 plants currently process over 1.5 million tons of glass annually and are the primary suppliers to the glass container and fiberglass industry in the western half of North America. Today, Paul leads the company globally as Chief Technology Officer. Prior to joining Strategic Materials, Paul worked in the turnaround industry and in the automotive aftermarket. Paul holds a BBA in accounting from the University of Notre Dame and is a certified public accountant. He resides in Malibu, California with his wife, Mary, and 2 children. And our last speaker, Susan Collins, is the president of the Container Recycling Institute and has worked on recycling and sustainability issues for more than 25 years. She leads CRRA's research and works with environmental organizations, activists, and governments around the world to educate on the benefits of packaging recycling. Ms. Collins has testified before the legislature of 11 U.S. states and territories. She is a board member of the National Recycling Coalition and a former board member of the California Resource Recovery Association, and she's also a very active advisor for CRRA as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with our first speaker, Adam Tauber. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone is healthy and safe and doing well. Don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to jump right into what's going on at CalRecycle and in the state. I don't know if any of you have seen a notice that came out this morning from the governor's office talking about the dire fiscal forecasts for the coming year. We're looking at probably up to a $54 billion deficit in the coming year. So that's going to have some impact on state operations. Too soon to say exactly what that's going to do, but it's fair to say that there's going to be some fiscal restraint going forward. Also from the governor's office, as I'm sure most of you already know, there was an executive order issued almost 2 weeks ago now that provides some relief to recycling centers, to buyback centers, and to the beverage dealers who are in unserved zones, basically giving all of them a break on enforcement in terms of, first for the buyback centers, because there are no temporary closure provisions in the Beverage Recycling Act. This allows recycling centers to be temporarily closed or reduce their hours if they need to because of the virus. And for the grocers, this allows them to suspend their buyback operations temporarily, essentially for the health and safety of their employees going forward. But both of these are temporary. They expire next month, and it's not exactly clear whether they'll be extended or not. We'll have to wait and see. So moving on from that, the question is really, how is COVID-19 impacting beverage container recycling? And we're going to hear more from some of the other folks about their individual experiences. What I can report is that our data is not entirely mature. The way that things are reported to us, in particular returns data from the buyback centers, is they report to us when they ship their material with a beginning and an end date for the period that's being covered by the shipment. So we don't have all of the data for March yet. Based on the data that we do have, we've got about 38 to 40% reduction in returns, comparing March, actually comparing the period from March 20th, 2020 to today, to the same period last year. The numbers are kind of up and down if you look at it on a weekly basis, but it's, I think, consistent with what I've been hearing from the various stakeholders that I've spoken to, about a 40% drop in returns. The sales data, that's even less clear. Manufacturers and the distributors for the sales data on the CRV, they're required to report to us at the end of the month following the month for which they're reporting. So What that means is we've only just started to get the March sales numbers at the end of April. Now we're into the just about to start the second week of May. We have some stragglers, so we don't have all of the sales data. It's hard for us to extrapolate based on what we've seen because some of the distributors that we've heard from are up and some of them are down. There's wide variability, and we've got a few of the larger players who haven't submitted their reports yet. So we're not entirely sure. The anecdotal evidence that we have is that the sales should be up for March, maybe even fairly significantly, due to the so-called pantry loading that people engaged in as soon as the shelter-in-place orders went out. Everyone went out and bought, in particular, bottled water, but everything else. Now, we don't know if there's going to be a rebound from that because people have stocked up and now they don't need to buy anything for a month or two. It's not clear that consumption will have really increased any. And in terms of the buyback centers, while the returns are down, we haven't seen necessarily a corresponding shift to that material to the curbside programs. What we suppose is that a lot of people are just holding on to their material. And once they're free to conduct business normally, they'll be bringing that material to the buyback centers. So there may be a spike in returns once we return to a more normal kind of operations on that. In terms of whether recycling centers and buyback centers are open or closed, again, we have poor data. We have some recycling centers have reported to us that they closed temporarily, and that was even in advance of the executive order. But we know that there are other recycling centers that closed temporarily without telling us because they were afraid that they would get in trouble because there was no executive order. And so we don't know who they are. We also know that a few recycling centers have closed permanently. But at the same time, for those that closed permanently, for many of those locations, we've already received applications from operators who want to open at those locations and take over that business. So all I can say is that we're in a state of flux. At this point, we're not seeing anything like, oh, you know, hundreds of recycling centers have closed. That is not the case. We still have the same problems that we had before the COVID crisis, with some areas around the state really being inadequately served by redemption centers, but other areas of the state that seem to still have plenty of coverage. For example, in Los Angeles, there are lots of recycling centers, although there are pockets of the metropolitan area that are unserved, for example, Santa Monica. But at the same time, we've got other areas of the state like San Francisco, San Mateo County, Alameda County, where there clearly are not enough recycling centers to serve the population there. So that hasn't changed. Let's see, how's my time going? Got a couple minutes. We've just published our quarter 4 for fiscal year 18-19 quarterly report. That just got published, put up on our website today, or might have been late yesterday. But beyond that, we've been doing some forecasting, assuming as best as we can, making assumptions about what the economy will do. So if we assume that we're going to enter into a recession that is similar to what we experienced in 2008, 2009, in terms of how that's going to impact sales and returns of beverages, it's not a pretty picture for our fund. If the recycling rate goes up about 5%, then we'll be out of cash in about 2 years. So this is a good opportunity, a good time for us to make reforms to the program. For those of you who are interested in participating in the legislative process. Sadly, the legislature seems to be a little bit preoccupied right now. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. If there are questions, I see I've got a question from Ted Ward, who says, have you considered flexibility in hours when buyback centers are reopened? Will there be any similar flexibility in daily load limits? Well, we're considering everything, but things like changing the load limits and changing the load limits would require a regulatory change. Changing the hours requires a statutory change. And so we look forward to having more conversations, more input from stakeholders on those issues. Are there any other questions?
Yeah. It looks like you did a good job covering everything. Great. Well, thank you for your time. We really appreciate CalRecycle and yourself being here and giving us an update.
Sure.
And with that, we'll go ahead and we'll move on to Richard Valle with Tri-Ced.
Thank you.
Richard, you ready? Yeah, thank you, Adam. You just need to unmute yourself there. There you go.
We're good?
Perfect. Yep. Take it away.
Adam, I have a lot of suggestions on how we can be more efficient. So we definitely want to be in engagement and conversation with your office. I think you've been one of the most progressive people that we've ever spoken to at CalRecycle. And hopefully the new leadership at CalRecycle will reflect that same philosophy going forward. I think collaboration is the real key here because we are living in different times. So I'm seeing a lot of legislators and elected officials, the methodology of communication has changed. In our buyback recycling center here at Tri-Ced, our peak for 2020 was the month of February. Let me give you some numbers. We were doing close to 2,000 pounds, 2,000 tons of material. We did 2,000 tons of material in 2018, and in 2019 we did 1,500 tons of material, and that's for the year. We paid out in 2018 $1.8 million in cash because we pay cash. In 2019 we paid $2.2 million in cash. In January, February, we're headed for some huge numbers. We were going to pay out, if that new customer account held January and February of 2020, we were projected to pay out close to $3 million in cash in CRV Materials to our customers. The customer account was in 2019 almost 60,000 customers per year. And in 2020, based on our numbers for January, February, we're going to exceed that to about 65,000 customers per year. When COVID hit in March, and then we have numbers in April, our daily tonnage went down, our monthly tonnage went down to about 102 tons, and then down to 100 tons per month in April. Now in May, we're slowly starting to see a recovery, and we were down to about 100 customers per day in April. Now we're up to about 250 to 315 customers per day. We're open Tuesday through Saturday. Our aluminum is on the rise. We're doing close to 3,000 pounds of UBC per day. We're doing between 4,000 and 8,000 tons of, pounds of glass, of CRV glass per day. We're doing about 2,000 to 4,500 pounds of PET plastic per day. The lines are beginning to form again down the street. We're getting complaints from surrounding businesses, although some of them are still not up and running. But because we're located on a corner, we have a significant flow of people. We have a lot of people coming in who are not wearing masks. We provide masks to our customers. We keep them in the car. We do not let them out of the car, except when they get paid. At the pay booth, we have a couple of plexiglass windows separating the customer from our cashier. All of our cashiers have small grape bottles like these. These are 80% alcohol. These came from a distillery in Vallejo where they were making alcohol, distilled spirits. Now they're making 100% alcohol. So everybody's issued one of these little bottles, and we spray everything with these little bottles, and we recommend 80% alcohol, and that's per the guidelines from our county health office. We have a lot of people who are homeless, so we have 2 portable toilets on the property. One's a handicap toilet, full service. The other one's not handicapped, and we have 2 sinks with lots of sanitizer and soap and towels available to our customers. We have 2 full-time staff that are working and doing nothing but sanitizing everywhere we touch and everywhere the customer is at, especially at the pay booth and the portable bathrooms. And those bathrooms are serviced weekly by a third party. All of our staff receive briefings every morning on safety and what to do. Everybody's required to wear masks throughout their shift. We have 2 shifts coming in during the day. One starts at about 8:30 and they leave at 12. The second shift starts about 12:15. There's a small overlap, and they leave at 5. So that in the event we have a positive test from one shift, the other shift won't be affected. This has been really working well. The customer service is being affected because we had to break up the shifts and the staffing. So as a consequence, the customers are waiting in line, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of distress for the customers. And the customers have been very cooperative and understanding that they have to stay in their vehicles and cannot exit their vehicles when we unload their materials. Huge amounts of material coming in recently. And I think, as Adam said, people were hoarding and keeping those CRV materials in their garages and in their backyards. We're starting to see a surge of that material now. When Adam was talking about the ratios for recycling centers, I have some exact numbers. In Los Angeles, the recycling centers there's 1 recycling center per 25,000 people. In our area here in Alameda County, there's 1 recycling center per 100,000 people, which could explain the surge that we're seeing. We don't know if there's a correlation, but we believe there might be a correlation between homelessness. As you know, the homeless count is around 60,000 in Los Angeles County. In the city, I think in Los Angeles itself proper. In our area, the homeless count is about 9,000. So we're curious to see if around recycling centers, homelessness is an issue because as more and more people are suffering, even though we have rent control ordinances throughout Alameda County, it's countywide for the 14 cities, those rent control ordinances will expire at the end of June. And so we don't know if we're going to see a surge in homelessness and people being evicted for back rents. So I think we should keep an eye on those things and see if there are any correlations to the economic stability of our economies and tracking how CRV may coincide with any surges in volumes. a lot of our customers are underemployed or completely unemployed. We've been doing candid anecdotal talking with people. We're thinking about doing a survey. We've done that in the past to see how people are reacting to COVID. And we've yet to put that together, but that's something that we'll be discussing in the future. And if I would recommend that maybe CalRecycle might be interested in doing something like that, so we can sort of measure the effects of COVID on our customers and their willingness to come into recycling centers. We're more concerned about their safety, and we're also concerned about the service that we're giving to them, and see if they can help us improve how we do things. I think that the help that we could use from the state is just simply more money to pay for equipment, for upgrading of equipment. We have some old equipment that's been here for quite a while. We have 2 service lines. They're efficient, but the cost of scales, because we're required by weights and measures to have very good scales for our materials. That's an annual cost that we have to incur. And when our scales are no longer useful, there's always an increase in the cost to upgrade to scales, and those are tremendously expensive. They're digital scales. So we could use some help in that area. And that technology is always being changed and advanced, and it's better, but it's expensive. Our conveyor belts, of course, take a beating because we're outdoors, so the elements, the sun and the rain take quite a toll on that equipment. Things like forklifts are really critical. I think a lot of times people, when they go to recycling centers, they're used to seeing old, beat up, clunky forklifts. So that technology is changing. Maybe we should look at electronic or electric forklifts or other kind of forklifts. Propane, of course, is another option, but I think we need to demonstrate to the community that we're changing technology in that area as well, because the amount of weight that these forklifts have to lift is not enormous, maybe a ton, and that's not a huge amount for a better forklift that can demonstrate to people that we can be better at what we're doing in terms of saving the environment. We did something in-house with our garden area. We have a really nice garden area. We try to lift our customer spirits by doing some in-house posters. And so when you come into the buybacks, there's about 14 posters that are all bright and cheery and different colors, lifting hope and lifting spirits of our customers. We've got a lot of compliments from our customers about the aura and atmosphere of Tri-Ced and how we sort of laid out the efficiency of the buyback. We have had one person whose family member tested positive for COVID, wasn't related to our workspace, but she's now in quarantine. She'll be in quarantine for 14 days starting yesterday. 2 members of her family, her mother and her stepfather, are both on ventilators at the local hospital. So a tremendous loss for us. We're not sure what's going to happen, but you know, COVID is real and it's out there, but it's never real until it hits you and you see a coworker go down or a family member go down. So we continue to talk to our staff every single day, including our recycling drivers, about staying safe. The order here in Alameda County has been lifted somewhat. There's some now construction work allowed. So there are some more outdoor jobs that are happening. A lot of people that were out of work are now going back to work, and we're seeing more consumption of PET. We're seeing more consumption of aluminum cans. So that continues to be, again, a surge that's coming across. We're proud that we can deliver pure separated glass to Strategic in Fairfield. It's still a long drive, but you know, there's nothing like green and brown and clear glass when you see it, and it's been fully separated. Unlike a curbside glass, which has batteries and other things in it that are huge contaminants. Our customers are really good about keeping their material clean, so I think there needs to be some incentive for customers. They like coupons, they like increases in prices. As you all know, the UBC price, the PET price, is taking a plunge, especially plastic, because of the cost of oil. So if the state can somehow free up some money so we can pay up a little bit more on the scrap value of that material, I think it would be a great incentive given the economic downturn that we're seeing with our customer base. Remember, in buyback recycling centers, people come in primarily because they're driven by the need for cash flow. And as much as we'd like to believe that's environmentally based as well, that's not the mentality of our customers. People are living on the margins, people are living on the edge, and they're on the brink. And a lot of them are literally walking in or on bicycles and literally living homeless. So that's a factor that I think that the state, again, needs to consider as part of the program. That's the reality of our current situation, and that's going to be the reality going forward. And we cannot ignore that. We need to pay attention to that, because when we debate about increasing the deposit, or we debate about increasing to spirits and wine, we should also debate about homelessness and the impacts that our economy and this COVID-19 has had on the people that are most vulnerable. And somebody needs to speak to that issue with a sound and solid voice. That's the voice that's been missing at the table. I've never heard it. And every time it gets mentioned, people discount it as that's somebody else's problem. And we think everything, again, is related. COVID doesn't take sides. COVID would hit anybody. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. And so if we're going to be environmentalists and we're going to think about the future of our society, we need to think about not just the environment, the waters and the rivers and the creeks and the flora and the fauna, but we also have to think about human beings. So again, we should not discriminate just because people are salvagers and they have to live on day to day. We see customers coming in day to day, literally, older women, younger men, all ages, all genders, again, and then also all nationalities that are struggling and fighting to keep themselves above water. And that needs to be a part of this conversation. It's an element that's rarely talked about. So I think we need to talk about the sociology of recycling as well. And that's something that needs to be on the table all the time. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. We do have a few questions for you. First, somebody was asking, what did you mean by CRV Materials?
Well, in California, it's an acronym for California Redemption Value, which is the CRV is on the container, and that's how we can tell if it's covered under the redemption law.
Another question, with only 16 recycling centers in Alameda County to serve 1.6 million people, what can Alameda County or StopWaste.org do to fund more recycling centers to open? One of the biggest cities in the county, Fremont, with over 200,000 people, does not have a recycling center.
I think that tells the story. So the deficiency is not on the local level because this is a California law. It's not a Fremont law. It's not an Alameda County law. This is something that's regulated by the state of California. It has to start at the state level. So our legislature has to take bold action.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here and giving us your feedback. It's been fantastic, and I know you're a busy guy, so thank you for taking the time. At this point, we're going to go ahead and move to Paul with Strategic Materials. Paul, take it away.
Hi, good morning. And Richard, thank you for that nice glass. It is good material. And Adam, thank you for the support we get from CalRecycle. We certainly appreciate that too. Strategic runs 6 plants here in California, 1 in Baja, and down in Mexicali. They're all fully operational. And we're following we're trying to be safe. We've canceled all of our meetings. We don't do safety committee meetings. We don't do tier calls. We suspended all corporate travel, all company travel, period. We're not taking business from vendors. All employees are wearing masks. We're not using our time clock. It's like kind of a handprint time clock, so we're just doing written time records. We staggered our lunches and breaks, try to give people space to spread out and keep safe distance. Sealed off the scale house. So we've taken a lot of steps. It's certainly impacted our business. We did have one case company-wide. We run 40 plants in 3 countries, so we're pretty, we've been lucky. The case was in Los Angeles. We were able to isolate the worker quickly, get him home. We sent the entire second shift home to be safe. They all stayed on payroll. We brought him back about a week ago, and we were able to isolate the COVID to 1 person and didn't have additional cases. We were very fortunate. We've got a process where the employees call in. We refer them to a company called Axiom, who helps us manage injuries. They're staffed with nurses, bilingual, so the employee talks to the nurse goes through the checklist to see whether they have it or not, and if they check enough boxes, COVID, they get tested, and we find out. But as I said, we've been fortunate so far. We clean all of our workstations every shift. We clean all rolling stock. We clean all common areas. So we're pretty circumspect as far as how we're trying to maintain safe working conditions for our people. We have seen a decrease in volumes. I'll get into that in a second. To help manage that from a cost point of view, we made a decision to cut hours, not employees. So we've reduced hours, we've eliminated overtime, just spread the hours out with the existing employees. So that's worked okay so far. You know, it's not a great long-term solution, but it's okay for the short term. From a supply point of view, our single stream material is kind of hung in there. We're coming in at about the same levels as last year. I think there's more people staying at home, obviously, more people consuming beverages and food containers at home, so it's getting put in the curbside bins. That was offset a little bit by waste management. Waste management shut down all the MRF operations for about a month, maybe a little bit longer. They've since come back online, so that material's returned, and now we're actually getting more curbside material than we got last year for the same time period. Where we've taken the heat is in the buyback glass. The buyback glass is off. It's kind of like a check mark. It came down abruptly and it's creeping back up slowly. It dropped off to about 45% of normal volume in mid-April. That was kind of the floor for us. So we're off 55%. It's now come back about 10%. So we're about 55% of this year's volume, and it is getting better. We're getting hot weather here in Los Angeles. It's dry, and people are going back to buyback centers. It's going to be a long road. That's affected us with a shift from buyback to curbside, because curbside is substantially more costly to process. You've got a yield loss component where we lose 25% of the glass that comes in from curbside. So there's more glass going into landfill, and it's harder to process. So we've had some challenges on it processing side. There was some confusion at the buyback levels. We had a lot of buyback centers, I think, that closed because they thought they weren't essential businesses. There wasn't great communication on that, at least initially. Some of them have come back. They've reopened. I think a lot of it's closed because nobody was coming in. So a lot of that volume's disappeared. Hopefully, it's going in someone's garage and it's going to come back here in May and June. But it's been some challenges. And of course, you know, bars are closed, restaurants are closed, casinos are closed, and those sporting events. So that's affected volume also. From a customer end user point of view, the container volume has been really strong. I think we're having a hard time keeping glass containers on the shelf, whether it's for beer or spaghetti jars or baby food jars. There's been a lot of demand. So our customers are running their furnaces full blast right now. So that's been positive. We're having a hard time meeting that demand because we don't have the inbound material we typically would have this time of year. Our other big customer base is fiberglass, mostly going into new homes. New home construction has taken a beating, really just stopped. No new projects are going forward right now, so it's going to be there's going to be a kind of a bloodbath in the second quarter. We're hoping it comes back in the third quarter, but that volume's off substantially for us. So we've shifted material from fiberglass markets to container markets. So we managed to kind of keep the glass flowing. And we think that will start coming back in the third quarter. I think a lot of our customers are having a problem hitting minimum content. It's been a challenge for them with a drop in volume. I know a couple of them are below minimum content now, but I expect as the material comes back, they'll be able to make up for that in the third quarter and fourth quarter. So I would anticipate them hitting minimum content for the year. So that's the customer side of things. You know, from a support standpoint, for what we like to see coming from the state of California is really simple for us. It's just more support for buyback centers. There's not enough of them, and the ones we have are closing and suffering. So anything we can do to support that side of the business would, I'd be completely behind. You know, we appreciate the support we do get, but we got to help those guys out because it's a tough world out there. The pricing, as somebody touched on earlier, the pricing is not great. Aluminum's been sideways, not down. Plastic's awful. The only thing really positive is corrugated, and that's not really a CRV product. So that's kind of the state of our business. We're surviving. We're doing okay for now. Hopefully, it's going to get better soon. So, any questions? I'm ready.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Are there any questions out there for Paul? I think you did such a good job explaining it all that nobody has questions for you.
Thank you for that comment.
Yeah, no, thank you for being here. It's really what you're doing is super important, and we appreciate everything that you're doing and helping out our small buyback centers at the same time. So thanks, Paul. If any other questions come up in the chat box, we'll go ahead and call them out. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and move on with Susan.
Great, thanks, Tracy. And nod if you can hear me. Okay, very good. Thank you. So now I want to talk about the things just to fill in the stories that weren't already told. Taking it from the perspective of this is a marketplace that starts when the consumer purchases the beverage, and we've got the sales trends that Adam talked about, and what do those mean for the whole system. And then when somebody's done with a beverage, they go to a redemption center, and there are all of those trends and the challenges that they're facing. And then the materials go to a processor like Paul at Strategic Materials for the glass, but there's also the PET reclaimers that take that material and the aluminum melters. And then eventually that material, after it gets cleaned up and reprocessed, it makes it back to the manufacturer of the containers, which is another. So all of these different players in the system are experiencing different things, some up, some down for different reasons, some COVID related, some market related. So I'm going to touch on sort of all of those. Adam told most of the story of beverage sales already. I'll fill in a little bit more that I've heard recently, just in the last couple of days, from some beverage brand owners, and also a story that was a little older. So right when shutdowns started to happen due to the coronavirus, the craft brewers were hit very quickly because a lot of their beer goes in kegs or in bottles, and it is sold in bars and restaurants and hotels. And one craft brewer that is a member in the state of Maine said that their business was affected so badly that they lost 50% of their business overnight. So it was a huge impact on them, and they were, that very first week, they were trying to figure out how they could dump the beer without negatively impacting the city's sewer system. And that was their big challenge that week. So that's just one anecdotal story, but it absolutely continues to this day. And the craft brewers even have a relief fund set up that people are donating to because it's affected that portion of the beverage industry so strongly, so badly. On the other side, makers of non-alcoholic beverages, and especially bottled water, have been performing way higher than usual, especially during the month of March when everybody was, Adam said, pantry loading. So that has happened. There was panic buying, there was hoarding. That period is over, and now sales are currently just a little lower than usual. So maybe some of the stuff that people bought in March, they're still using now. What's going to happen in the future, though, is that the beverage industry typically relies on several key holiday weekends throughout the year. That's when the majority of their sales occur. And also we see that typically, I think the biggest month for beverage sales across the board is the month of June. All of that is in front of us, and that's what the beverage industry is going to be looking at right now. That's going to tell them a lot about how their whole year is going to go. As one of them told me, the holiday weekends will be a test. And we'll see if the recession and the stay-at-home, people not having the same, Memorial Day weekend cookouts and 4th of July, if they're not doing that, then we may see that beverage sales are a little lower than usual across the board. So that's the story that I've been told from our members on the beverage sales side. Next, we go into the California Redemption Program. First, I'll give the worldwide perspective. Container deposit laws are so popular as a means of recycling, as a means of litter reduction, as a means of reducing plastic waste in the ocean. They are so popular right now that in a 3-year period, we saw enough new beverage container deposit laws passed that it doubled their coverage worldwide. So at the beginning of 2017, we saw that 300 million people around the world were covered by container deposit laws, and 40 million of those people are here in California. So it was 300 million, and then enough new laws passed over that 3.5 year period that the new laws will now cover, the new and existing laws will now cover a total of 600 million people. And we can see that very easily going to 1 billion people worldwide because of the Single-Use Plastics Directive in the EU and some more laws that have just been passed in the last couple of months, and the general trend. So that's the trend nationally. But of course, we've struggled here in California. The California program is very important to beverage container manufacturers nationwide because the California program supplies 20% of all the beverage containers that are recycled in the US. So 1/5 of it happens here. So if something happens in California, it will be felt by beverage manufacturers around the nation. Of course, we've seen hundreds of redemption centers that have closed. It's actually more than 1,000. It's around 1,300 that have closed in the last 5-6 years here in California. And more recently, we've seen the temporary closures of sites that Adam referred to, and Paul also referred to the suspension of some curbside programs here in California for a short period of time as well. So all of that did depress volumes in March. And what I heard from my sources in the last couple of days is that Southern California redemption centers now, this week, are receiving volumes that are about like normal. So it could be that those stored containers that people held in their homes or their garages over the last couple of months, those are sort of coming back right now. So even though there aren't that as many people returning containers, they're probably returning a higher volume. So we're getting the March and April volumes into the redemption centers right now. But the other thing I realized by asking people about this is that we can't talk about California as all one state. What's happening in Northern California is very different than the rest of California. So while we're getting normal volumes here in Southern California, and we have the availability of redemption centers more or less in Southern California, we don't have that in Northern California. There are still huge recycling deserts in Northern California that have long-term implications that are not affected by these ups and downs in the last couple of months. And I live in a recycling desert here in Southern California too. It's not just Santa Monica, it's all of the cities around and neighborhoods around Santa Monica. It's an area of 320,000 people that doesn't have a single redemption center. California is open, which is different than some of the other states. Like the state of Michigan right now only has returned to retail only at grocery stores, and that program is closed right now statewide. They're working on plans to reopen it and do it in a new way. Connecticut is coming back online in the next couple of weeks, and they've put together standards for what reopening will look like there. Connecticut has redemption centers as well as return to retail, but the return to retail portion has been closed. So that's one bright spot, is that at least California has stayed open this whole time and kept the materials moving through, because with complete closure in a state like Michigan, one of the things that they're concerned about is that surge of materials that might come through when the state reopens. And with physical distancing, that's not, you don't want to surge, obviously. California's program is now the only one in the world that makes redemption centers rely as much as they do on scrap prices. And the scrap prices have been incredibly volatile, and that's just not a good way to run things. It's not a good way for little mom and pop redemption centers to have to operate, where a whole bunch of their revenue that they're depending on can be here today and gone tomorrow. The state of Hawaii has now moved to a new model where they just pay flat fees per container and expect the redemption centers to live on the payments that they get from the state. And if scrap prices go up and down, that volatility isn't going to impact on the redemption centers anymore. So now that leaves us, California is the only place in the world with 60 programs worldwide. We're the only ones who do it this way, and it's clearly not working for the redemption centers. We're concerned also about the fund, the Beverage Container Recycling Fund, because it's been raided in the past. Borrowed pieces of the fund have been borrowed to pay for other things, which then had a negative impact on the redemption center pricing. And the program does support 8,000 jobs in the state, so we're definitely advocating for the fund to be used to just cover the program and keep all of those jobs in play, keep all of those redemption centers and the other recycling companies in the state, keep those all operating in a healthy way. So now onto two of the markets, and I'll try to do this quickly. PET, you really have to think of that as two completely different markets. There's the deposit material, sometimes called premium grade, and then there's curbside material, sometimes called grade B or non-premium, depending on where you are in the country. Here, for the redemption centers in California, the price drops for PET have been so large that it's equivalent to about a $30 million drop in revenue to the redemption centers. So that's a big impact on them. The premium grade will also perhaps suffer. We don't know how this will play out, but virgin resin prices are down a lot due to both oil being worth near zero, the incredible drop in oil prices recently. And in addition to that, I lost my train of thought there, so I'll move on. So the prices for virgin are way down, and recycled content competes with virgin on price. So that has brought the pricing down, and it also means that we are now relying on whether or not the brand owners are going to keep their commitments about what they've said they want to use for recycled content, because they've got a really easy, cheap choice now: just buy more virgin material and ignore the recycled content. And that's why the recycled content law that passed but was vetoed by the governor, we need that to come back in some form to support that marketplace. When it comes to the curbside materials, we've got another thing happening nationwide, which is most of that material was going to be made into carpet. Paul talked about residential construction being down. That means carpet is down. Carpet sales are down. If they don't need the materials to make more carpet, and if they can get cheaper material by buying virgin PET, then the supply-demand relationship has just gone way out of balance. There's not as much demand for that curbside PET nationally. And we're going to see that trend play out over the next couple of months. I'll say that on aluminum, for other reasons, aluminum saw a price drop that was so significant that it translates to $40 million in revenue loss for the redemption centers in the in California. But the aluminum can makers seem to be okay. They seem to be able to switch out and use more virgin resin where they weren't getting as much aluminum cans due to the closure of so many deposit programs. It's huge for them percentage-wise. It's 20% of the material that they normally get, but they were able to use other sources of material, and it wasn't a price shock to them because both virgin and recycled aluminum prices are lower. So for pricing, they weren't affected as badly as some of the other industries have been. So it wasn't really a negative impact on the aluminum can sheet makers, is what I'm hearing. And lastly, I'll just say the things that we are advocating for here at CRI. We are advocating to fix this chronic problem of underpaying the redemption centers and forcing so many of them to go bankrupt. That absolutely needed to be solved years ago, and it still needs to be solved today. And things financially just keep getting worse for the redemption centers. So we definitely need more money to support the redemption centers. But we also need to look at total reform of the way that we return beverage containers. There are now touch-free or contactless systems. There are bag drop systems. There are reverse vending machines that have been reprogrammed so that nobody has to touch the machine. And in this environment, in order to make it safe for people to get their money back, we need to look at those systems, and we need to reform the way that we return containers. Also, Californians receive $900 million a year in redemption payments. This is no time to be losing redemption centers and forcing consumers to not have an opportunity to get those payments back. There were some pilot projects out there that we're going to look at some new ideas, some new ways to operate, and those have been going very, very slowly. It's time for us to jumpstart those and get those pilot programs approved and into effect and try those new ways. And lastly, I'll just say that we have to protect this program. Again, we can't raid the fund. We have to use it to do what it was intended to do, which is to keep those redemption centers moving and protect the 8,000 recycling jobs in this state. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Susan. We do have a few questions for you. First off, what about CRV redemption kiosks? Can someone speak to funding those and getting those out to our communities to increase access while mitigating exposure of COVID concerns?
Yeah, right now it's really been hung up for a long time. It's been proposed many times. It's not. There's some key things in the legislation that make a kiosk with no person not possible right now. And that's the kind of thing where we just need to put our heads together and have enough imagination and innovation to figure out how to change the law to make those possible.
Great. So any comments on COVID-related changes to international market demand for recovered material? I know you kind of went over some of that, but anything extra you want to talk about?
Well, not so much because I'm focusing on the beverage container deposit program, and here in California, a lot of people don't know this, but you should know that I referred to those 8,000 jobs that the program supports, and that's because we have a lot of our infrastructure from soup to nuts right here in California. So that material can go back through a redemption center, and if it's a glass bottle, it can go through one of the sites that Strategic Materials operate and go right back into one of the glass bottle making facilities here in California and be made into a bottle here in California. And it just all stays and keeps doing that loop over and over here in California. And the same thing is true with many of the PET containers, because we have this beverage container program. One of the great things that this beverage container program has done is that it has supported the development of 5 or 6 PET reclaimers in the state of California. So again, the material can be made into a new product and new food packaging right here in California. So that's why there's a little less emphasis on the international markets, because almost all of our PET stays here in California, same with the glass, and then our aluminum stays in the United States.
And one last question. Do consumers still have to pay the CRV in Michigan even though there is no opportunity for redemption? Is that legal? Good question.
Yes, that is something that has happened in all of the states, and I've gotten that question from people in all of the states. People are really frustrated with that. Our institute has received a lot of phone calls from individuals in random states saying, how is this fair that I have to do this? And including one woman who said, I have a 1-bedroom apartment. I just can't store the containers for, weeks on end. And so that's why there's a lot of pent-up demand from consumers to find a way to get those bottle rooms open in those other states so that people can get their nickels and dimes back. And especially if they've lost their jobs, that redemption money is even more important to them.
So does Michigan, do they still have to pay they still have to pay CRV because it's already set up in the system, right? But they can't, so they have to hold it. I got it. Great.
It's sort of a pause situation. They're still paying in, but they have to pause on getting their money back.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Well, this concludes our webinar. I wanted to thank all of the speakers for being here. It's been a really enlightening webinar, and thanks for your time. I know you're all busy and doing great work, so continue doing that and stay safe during these times, and then we will look forward to hearing back from our community about what you would like to see next in our future webinars. So take care, and thanks everybody for being here today.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
How would I, excuse me?